On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So I have the definition, but for me, I'm saying, what makes an adult? It's, being able to be self-sufficient. I wouldn't think my child would be self-sufficient. She's dependent on me to live. Me being an adult means I can depend on myself to live.
Let me take a page out of JR's book real quick and throw a bonus question. So we're talking about adulthood, right, and things of that nature. Who on the panel believes, because we have boundaries and constructs that are in place that hold people accountable. So when an adolescent whose brain isn't fully developed, right, commit a heinous crime, whatever, and they're held accountable as an adult, do we
You supporting my argument, really?
I'm asking, do we all agree that adolescents should be held accountable as an adult? When you make the statement that the lawmakers that are voted into office are representatives of the people, the caveat that I would throw in there is that they don't always represent the best interest of the people, and there are lobbyists.
No, I didn't say the best interest.
Or
I said
any of the
representation of the people at large.
Sure, and they're also lobbyists who have far more say in the crafting of legislation and our policies
than general population,
than the actual voters do. And so when we're having this conversation around age, and I understand that, see, what I interjected around introducing other cultures and what they do, and introducing my great granddad and my granddad, and when they were determined to be adults, so on and so forth, was we learn from those past experiences. We learn from those past experiences, and men were expected to be young men were expected to be more responsible and more mature at a younger age. So when we begin to introduce laws and legislation, and I don't have the information, the data or statistics. I would actually, after this, I'm probably going to be more inclined to deep dive into it and see why did we come up with smoking is acceptable at 18.
But really, the expectation for what men had to do back then was based off of the environment by which they existed. Right? We live in a much more advanced, technologically savvy world. And
lifespan was shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, there were consequences that went along with that, right? There were consequences. Jobs were much harder. People died a lot earlier. The men's life expectancy was much different. Women couldn't vote. Freedoms. It's so many factors that go into why men were expected to move a specific type of way. It was based off of the environment and survival. Now we are in a space to where we are so advanced technologically that we've had to modify things not only based off of that technology, but also along with that, we modified it based off of learned experiences. We have data. We have things that we can cite. We have, history that we can I know Kay is smiling off of that. We have history that we can tap back into to make better decisions and evaluate how it is that we're supposed to move, right? Back then, think about it. I mean, what was normal? Slavery was normal. That was accepted. That was a normal thing. Now, since we've evolved and we continue to learn, right, we're saying, that might not have been such a good idea. So should we still use the same standards that we judged our ancestors off of in order to evaluate what adulthood is? Or do we modify those standards according to the new learned information that we have?
Well, Anton, you got to think globally, like what Riva was saying. It's just because in America things were different, however long ago or wherever. Today, like in this day and age, in 2021, around the world, there are still many different things. And I think that's why I liked a lot of what you were saying, Riva, because I like to think that way too. Like just because something is the way it is here and that culturally we accept it and of course, live by it and whatnot, doesn't mean that the entire world is in that same situation.
Because if that was the true mark for adulthood, it would be the same across the board.
Everywhere. Yeah.
But also piggybacking off of what Anton actually just said, back then when slavery was legal, it was against the law to run away, right? And those laws were put in place by people, right? Pass it down now, those same people put the age restrictions on something things, and they tell us what age is acceptable and what age is not acceptable in the same exact fashion as well.
Well, listen, I'm not saying that you. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that you guys are wrong.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I'm saying that you can't use that argument only one way. You
Correct.
can't use it to measure how people are supposed to act on one end of the spectrum as far as how old they are, and then not use that same thing to evaluate how it is that they're supposed to act on the other end of the spectrum as far as their adolescence. That's all I'm saying. If you're making that argument, you have to be consistent across the board. That's all I'm saying. So because of that, I have to establish a standard to say that adulthood, and of course you can anomaly if there's going to be more mature people here, you know, whatever, we take business interests into consideration, growth, technology, or whatever. But in order to be able to set a standard within a modern society, you have to establish a baseline.
Yeah.
I don't know what that baseline should be. That's a whole nother conversation, but you have to
yeah.
establish a baseline.
And I think a lot of times we look at being an adult when we talk about responsibilities are you a law-abiding citizen? Meaning, do you pay taxes? That's something in adulthood that we look at. Are you adult? Oh, are you paying taxes? Do you file your W-2s? So that's something too. That is part of being responsible. We can't say adolescents would be a responsible citizen because they're still dependent. Are you able to not have a dependent and be independent on your own? Meaning if you're married or not, you know, are you able to be a law-abiding citizen? Citizen meaning paying taxes. And even I know, JR, you put in a super chat where someone said, you know, adulthood doesn't have the word maturity in it or mature. The definition literally does. And even just pulling up, it's the state or condition of being fully grown or mature. That is the definition of adulthood. So for me, that would be the standard. And it's like, well, what is maturity? Well, being able to be a grown adult on your own. Are you able to be a law-abiding citizen, which means control?
But see, that's when you add
control
stuff
over yourself, where you're abiding by the laws.
You said on your own. That wasn't a part of the definition.
Well, this is what I'm defining as.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So I have the definition, but for me, you know, I'm saying, you know, what makes an adult? It's, you know, being able to be self-sufficient. I wouldn't think my child would be self-sufficient. She's dependent on me to live. Me being an adult means I can depend on myself to live.
Let me take a page out of JR's book real quick and throw a bonus question. So we're talking about adulthood, right, and things of that nature. Who on the panel believes, because we have boundaries and constructs that are in place that hold people accountable. So when an adolescent whose brain isn't fully developed, right, commit a heinous crime, whatever, and they're held accountable as an adult, do we
you supporting my argument, really?
I'm asking, do we all agree that adolescents should be held accountable as an adult?